Hello and welcome to the Six Cells podcast. This is Mike Nicholson from Six Cells. Today's episode is sponsored by Lumen Research, the company that's helping brands turn attention into action. And I'm delighted today to welcome Nigel Clarkson, the CRO at TapTap, to the show. Welcome, Nigel. How are you?
Thanks for having me. All good, thank you.
Good to see you outside of a screen for once, in real life.
Yeah, a real life meeting in the same location.
In the same location. It might catch on, who knows? So as is traditional, could you give us a little bit of a potted history of your career to date, please?
So I started in media many years ago in the 90s, and I was one of those unique people that actually knew I wanted to get into marketing. I didn't necessarily know what marketing advertising exactly was. I actually started off selling out-of-home space, spent some time at Classic FM, Prime Site, another outdoor business, and about probably 12 years ago, it was very clear the direction of travel in all media planning was around platforms and data. And at that time, out of home was not on that journey. So I made an active decision to take myself into a world and I guess make it a little bit uncomfortable for myself, learn something new. So I moved and then I've had since then really sort of 10, 12 years worth of different data platform businesses, including Exterior and Global, heading up out of home then, and then most recently running the world's biggest out of home only programmatic DSP, and now TapTap, nearly a year working for TapTap Digital, which is a global Omni-channel DSP.
Excellent, thank you very much. So you've fit quite a lot in there. Then there's quite a lot of years of knowledge under the belt, as it were. What's the best bit of advice you've either been given or have received in that time that somebody else might better use?
So there's a couple of bits of, I know we need to be a bit careful with sporting analogies, but my old company was Canadian, and Wayne Gretzky, famous ice hockey player, used to say, skate where the puck's going, no, not where it's been. And I think that's something from a career point of view I've always thought about, learning the direction of travel. Don't be surprised in 10 years time that AI is a thing, right? It's very obvious that AI is going to be important in every business. So, if you need a change, try and find the direction of travel. Programmatic, likewise, if you're just thinking about coming out of traditional media into programmatic, you might be a bit late. So I think that's quite useful. And then the sort of advice or conversations we have with agencies across most of my last roles has been around the difficult bit about starting is starting. I think in our worlds now of media and being so data driven, I feel like we feel that we have to have 100 boxes ticked before we can do anything. And actually sometimes doing some tests when most of the boxes have been ticked is okay. And just starting that process of working with a new partner, working with a new client, onboarding a new data set, for example, I wish we would be a little bit braver about taking calculated minimal risk. So I think the hardest bit about starting is I think useful in life, and particularly for all of us in adtech.
Like life in beta, right? You've got to start, measure, learn, move on.
Yeah. Otherwise, every decision you make in life and business, you're only making because you are absolutely guaranteed that thing is going to have the result that you want it to have, and that's not how humans behave. And again, I think I know most of your listeners probably sort of more ad tech driven, and there's some incredible minds in our business, but we have to be very mindful all the time that the ad tech drives advertising. And advertising at its heart was a principle of persuasion. It's about awareness. It's about driving people to try something they didn't know about before. And the data funnel has driven us so granular that often, when we're advertising for a new cheese spread, we're only advertising to people that we know have searched for eating cheese spread in the last week. Well, that's fine. You might flip some of those customers about, but there's hundreds of potential customers you're not speaking to because you don't necessarily know they're right. So I'm sure we'll talk about this, but moving away from super one-to-one, granular sort of tracking and targeting, that's been the best result of the whole debacle around cookies for me. The cookie thing's now a sideshow. They'll go in time, and already 50% of ads served digitally in the UK don't have cookies appended, which is great. So we're looking at other alternatives. That's really important, and I think that's probably been the biggest effect of all of the conversations around cookies declining.
Yeah, very good. So TapTap, tell us a little bit about TapTap then. Who are you? What do you do? Who do you do it with? That sort of thing.
Yep. So TapTap is a Spanish headquartered business. Been around for about 13, 14 years. We actually launched as a mobile ad exchange many years ago. Probably 5-6 years ago, through some of the work we're doing around geo, basically developed into a much wider geospatial, geotemporal data management business, basically. And our business now has two parts. We have a data insight consultancy business, which is a separate business to the media business. And then the TapTap business, we have a DSP called Sonata. Sonata musically being the coming together of many bits. And the Sonata DSP is an omni-channel planning platform. We're a DSP, so we do all the things that DSP could do, but we have a fairly unique vision around how we manage our data. And we weave all of our data attributes, all of our data segmentation is woven through the eye of context, physical context and location.
Okay. So Sonata, obviously the bringing together of many pieces, as you said there. So would you consider yourself to be a kind of a generalist DSP or a specialist DSP? And how do agencies look at that, and how do clients look at that, and how are they using you alongside other DSPs?
Yeah, well, we do talk about this a lot. I think if you go into an agency, and we're relatively new, sort of year and a half into the UK. So when we go into a new agency, often we'll do our creds presentation at the end. They say, that's really good. You've got some amazing stuff there. You sound a bit like, and then they'll insert a partner that does something like.
You think needs a bucket, right?
Yeah, and that's cool, right? Because agencies by definition are generally segmented into practices. And so the question around whether we're a specialist, I believe that we are a generalist DSP because we're omni-channel, so we can access all media channels, like genuinely. There's a lot of companies that say they're omni-channel that have bits missing and have to serve through third party. We genuinely can deliver ads to all media channels. So in that instance, we're a generalist DSP. Like, you can come on and plan and build your audiences, and we use multiple different data sets. We are also a specialist DSP in the way in which we handle the data. So location data is really interesting. We are leaving footprints behind us, both in the physical world and in the online world. And most of those footprints can be georeferenced, whether that's through postcodes, through addresses, through lat long coordinates, through H3, H4, which is the new technology that Uber is using for their location. But anything that has a kind of a cartographic application can be mapped physically, and some of that will be, most of it actually is open API data, so it's all anonymized, it's aggregated often at a postcode level, it's GDPR compliant, it's non-tracking, it's not one-to-one, it's one to a very highly targeted many. So in that respect, and the manner in which we handle and manipulate the data to make sure that all of the different data sets we access are kind of scored at a location level, if that was your definition, then I would say we're probably a specialist DSP, because we do things that I don't believe anyone else does. But for me, a specialist DSP by definition sounds like somebody that only does radio or only does out of home. And again, there's a great place for those, but certainly the direction of travel in agencies is they want fewer DSPs, not more.
So Nigel, I feel like when people talk about location, they're often talking about different things. There's a wide sort of range of applications of location, from pinging somebody immediately outside of McDonald's and trying to get them to buy a Big Mac to much sort of broader applications. So how do you think about location? What is location to you, and what is the power of that location?
Yeah, there's definitely there's some history around the term location, and people have a definite view of that as that kind of hyper-local, super moment-based delivery of an ad outside of McDonald's. And I think we try to think more holistically about location, and there is certainly a lot of data, both through private partnerships, but also through open APIs that is available at a location level. So we actually talk about area-based marketing, because it's not always about the location that somebody is in that you want to target them. Sometimes it's about understanding locations where people have been, locations where people are likely to be, where they live. And again, all of this data, a lot of this data set is available, anonymized and aggregated at a postcode level. So there's huge amounts of understanding we can gather about every postcode, or every, what we call a geohash. It's a small square, but it's kind of a globally recognized geospatial unit rather than a made-up media term. And there are 200,000 geohashes in the UK. And so when we measure the density or the index, the affinity area, we call it, the strength of an area against your target market, we're comparing that area to 199,999 other geofences to understand the index. So effectively what we do is we're able to rank the whole of the UK from the very best area for your target audience to be in to the very worst. And then the conversation becomes, what do you want to do with that? Do you want to just hit the top 10%? Do you want to target the bottom 10% because they're people that you need to flip? What budget have you got available? What media? What moments? So yeah, we definitely think a lot of the questions we get around locations, they go, right, you sound a bit like, and then they'll mention somebody who's got more of a reputation in location. We are an area-based marketing business. We are geospatial, geotemporal, so we understand the importance of geography, place and time. And all of the outcome of that is to build effectively a holistic heat map of where your customers are most likely to be at certain times and then activate it. So yeah, the location beaming a lightning bolt from the sky to outside a Nando's, while that still has it has interesting implications, one of the challenges we get is people go, yeah, we don't really get many location briefs. I'm like, oh, right, so you're not interested in understanding like where your customers live, or you're not understanding the journeys that your customers make to your stores, and so I think there's a reframing of how people perceive kind of location to be of value to them as a business, and part of our education process and agencies actually isn't really around how we do what we do, although it's really smart. Actually, it's around why area-based marketing as a function and as a data segment is actually really, really valuable to a brand, any brand really.
Excellent. So as you were talking there, I was thinking about applications of location. I think most people would get the idea that if you have a store on Oxford Street, you might want to advertise around Oxford Street. Yeah. But it goes a lot bigger and deeper than that, right? It's not just about where your physical bricks and mortar stores are. If you were to map where all of your current customers are across a country, they wouldn't be evenly spread in every sort of postcode, right? There would be clusters of people in certain areas, and maybe less so in other areas. So how would you, if you're not a bricks and mortar type business, how would you think about location to try and figure out where your current customers are and where your best new customers might be coming from?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think you're right. There's an obvious strength of area-based marketing to work with retail brands and FMCG to understand that kind of that classic drive to store. Probably our biggest sort of category of clients, because there is a very clear, and it's funny, we talk about customer journeys in media, meaning I go onto a website and then I click, and actually we think about customer journeys as a physical human wakes up in the shop and goes to a store and buys stuff. And I was at a talk at MadFest, and I think one of the Tesco brands was talking about something like 85% of all products in Tesco's is sold in a store, and yet we obsess with the 15% of device-based sales and e-com. So, but the location bit is really important. So, there's a study called the Commuter Commerce that looks at how e-com is huge in commuter segments, particularly in London, where people are on public transport on a hands-free to make purchases. And you think about your own behaviours around fashion and Amazon purchases that you do on the move. So, having media channels that affect people and drive them to make an online product is just as important as physically pushing them into a store. Because remember, all of this data is it's finding the right customers. It's not saying that you have to only serve them an ad when they're right at the front doorstep of the retailer. It's just that these customers need to know about your product in order that they can make a choice about going into the store if you have one, or going online. And that seeing an ad and then searching for a product is not, it's not beyond the wit of man or woman these days. It's a very that customer journey is a very simple one. So yeah, we think about targeting the right people, and whether that happens to lead to an e-com or a real world purchase is broadly irrelevant, although clearly we're always surprised how much focus isn't being placed on physically understanding people's journey to a store. What Nick Ashley at Tesco talks about, from sofa to store, to understanding that TV in the evening, and then that sequential messaging for mobile, audio on the move, digital out of home, and then driving people in store. So there's definitely a really strong play with retail media and area-based location understanding.
Well, that's amazing, because that was my next question. This sounds a lot like retail media. It's a growth area. Yeah. And quite an exciting one. And of course, retail media done well is omni-channel, right? It's and as you say, Nick Ashley, who was on this podcast as well, he talking about sofa to store. It is funny, isn't it, that how in digital we have thought about the customer journey as all being on the screen, and kind of disregarded completely what's going on off the screen. Like which is where, you know, we talk to clients at Six L's all the time about living in the physical world and the digital world, and while this will never be replaced, being able to sit sort of opposite you and have a conversation, there is a lot of scale and conversation that can be had in the digital world as well. So how,
and that's a really important, so bridging the gap, like that's actually an amazing summation of, I think, what area-based marketing does, using location to kind of unify online data sets and offline data sets, and the stories that data tells us is incredibly powerful, because we're not saying that you should only focus in store, because online clearly is important as well, and the area-based logic will be able to help educate both. And the retail media space is really interesting. Clearly it's very exciting. It's, you know, everyone's on every stage talking about everything. There's acquisitions being made in the space, agencies are making big plays there, and you know, some of retail media is stuff that we've always done. You know, I was at Clear Channel in the 90s when we launched Sainsbury's ads, and you know, all of the major supermarkets have got digital point of sale there. They've all had in-store forever, and you know, it's kind of like never the twain shall meet once you enter the doors. That was shopper marketing budgets, and you know, get out. So I remember speaking to agencies back in the day, to Visium, who had Coca-Cola back in the day. We had an in-store product in one of the outdoor companies I was working for. And as soon as they saw that the opportunity was in the store, they're like, oh no, it's not us, we can't touch that, shopper marketing. And I feel like the connection points between in-store data, loyalty, payment, you know, a lot of that information that obviously the likes of Dunnhumby and Tesco have, but also any retailer will have, and understanding how to connect that with outside of the store. Because at the moment, most of the focus is in-store. We believe we've got a major part to play in helping stores and products to understand how to get their customers into the store to buy it. So at the moment, we're targeting people at that very, very last, you know, that the tightest moment of recency that you physically can, which is great. It's always worked well for outdoor and commercial radio. But actually that brand story of getting people to understand that there's a product that they want to try or to seek out, that customer journey has to have happened a long time before people are in the store.
Yeah, when Nick from Tesco was on the show, we were talking about the opportunity that potentially exists for CMOs to prove the power of brand, because you can find where your customers are using TapTap. Other DSPs are, I'm sure, available, but since you're here, let's talk about TapTap. So you can find where your audience are. You can serve a brand campaign, perhaps with a +6, +7 coverage, and then see how they end up buying in the local stores, in the local Sainsbury's and Tesco's and whatever, and then close that loop versus people you didn't target with the brand message. How much did that segment buy? Yeah. And then how much did the segment that saw the brand advertising? And then obviously the uplift is the power of the brand advertising. And I think CMOs have really struggled with proving the power of brand, especially in hard times when everything's about ROI. But that's just one of the sort of fantastic opportunities that exist there for.
Yeah, it's really easy to test, right? You want to study a town or even a specific part of town and understanding footfall patterns into that store or past a different store, or you want to geo-conquest the competitor. That testing module is so easy with area-based. It's not you don't have to take national campaigns, and because all of the channels are now addressable to a local level, you can do localized TV, and you can measure in one town and city the effect of telly and out of home together. You can measure out of home and mobile together. You can do all three, and I think that we have done some of that, but I'm surprised we don't do significantly more. We saw Coca-Cola spoke yesterday at a conference we were at, then they talked about like that they're sitting on an incredible, like an inordinately large amount of sales data, because pretty much every store that sells soft drinks sells Coca-Cola. That's all done at a geo level. So their database of sales is phenomenally large. So understanding the geo of your sales and therefore effectively your customer mapping is really important. And I don't think many clients do that at any level. They understand at a retailer level, they'll understand their stores and their throughput with Tesco's and Sainsbury's because they would, but they probably don't necessarily have enough time or resource to understand at an individual store level and a catchment to store level of the effect of advertising, at an area-based level.
Yeah, Coke's one of the classic examples of why you need to take the context of the consumer away from the screen as seriously as what's going on the screen, right? Because if it's you're stood at a bus stop outside a convenience store and it's boiling hot and you've got 10 minutes till the bus comes, all of that information is quite important as to whether you're likely to want to go and buy a Coke or not.
Yeah.
If it's peeing down with rain, you've only got 1 minute and you're in a bit of a rush, and much less likely to buy a Coke. And being able to understand that offline behaviour, not just what's going on in the pixels on the screen, is like super important.
Yeah, and ironically, in our modern world, that would probably be attributed to a click or a digital ad, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's out of home particularly. It's a really interesting time using. It's always used area location. I think there are some ad tech companies starting to lean into the out of home space now, which is great. And they come on stage and they go, "We're here to save out of home with data." Like, out of home's always had data. They don't just put billboards up by accident. You know where the stores are. We know where customers live. It's just that maybe there's some real-time data, and maybe you can execute through digital screens some real-time moments and DCO and DMO based campaigns quicker than you could in the old days. But I think understanding customer journeys and presence and placements of ads now will be much more measurable using the in-store retail media data, rather than, we did a TV campaign, therefore that's why the sales went up.
Yeah. One of the campaigns I'm most proud of in my career was when I was at the Telegraph. I was looking after a product called Telegraph TV, which was video on demand. It was a news service for the Telegraph, but in video instead of written. And we did a deal with an outdoor company that have the transvision screens at Victoria, Waterloo, etc. And what we did is we had that captive moment, so we understand that there's lots of people standing looking at the delayed orange boards, right? And so you've got a moment of downtime where you've got nothing else to do, and we put up, turn on your Bluetooth and get the latest news from the Telegraph free to your phone. And we got it sponsored by a brand. It was American Express, and they were so impressed with the results of the downloads and the rest that they asked us to put it together so they could sort of distribute it internally. But the reason I tell you that is not because I'm very proud of a campaign of like 15, 20 years ago, is it really shows that if you understand what's going on in the consumer's world, in the physical world, not just what's happening in the digital world, then you can plan for those moments of downtime. I think you talk about moments as being one of the key things that you plan against, right? It was what's going on in that consumer's life and in their sort of surroundings. And if you're just suddenly standing there thinking, "Oh crap, my train's late," then that's a great time to hit somebody with, maybe you'll decide to do this.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You would have thought an enormous billboard that you're staring at waiting for your train information with a commercial message would work.
Yeah, I know.
Crazy, eh? Also, you should get a yellow card in real life for self-nominations. I know that happens.
It wasn't 6 Cells though, was it? It was just Mike Nicholson at Telegraph. So, but I'll take the yellow card. Fair. So, are there any other applications for area-based marketing that we haven't covered so far?
So I think there's a consulting side of the business which isn't even media. So, as a business, we are involved with helping governments with, things like traffic counts, with areas and locations for retailers to build their next store, because it's all based on catchment, competitive catchment, traffic, journeys, relevant customer audiences, with election planning. There's a lot of applications for geo in the non-advertising, let's call it the real world, but in the non-advertising world. So we have a separate sort of consulting division that does that. I think for all media channels, the challenge is that location has always been used for digital and mobile and online video. It's always been used for out of home. I think there's really exciting opportunities for audio and telly to be planned around a location basis. So you've worked in radio before, have you? Commercial?
No.
Right. So I did 3 years at Classic FM back in the day, and radio's always sold itself as, because it was a friend in the house when it was, and then more and more radios in cars, and now obviously with devices, audio and podcasts becoming so popular that audio on the move is a really exciting channel, and yet a lot of analog, if we can use that term for radio, is sold at big TSA, transmission survey areas, to big towns for local or national footprint. So I think that ability to be able to deliver hyper-local audio is good, exciting, relatively new. And CTV, again, the hot topics tend to be at the moment around CTV and around retail media. CTV aside from the supply conversation, which is a whole separate world that we don't want to get into, I think that addressable television allows people to be hyper local with their TV that they've never been able to do before. So a new gym opening in Maidstone in Kent, you're not going to buy a telly campaign because you'd have to deliver it to the whole of Meridian, Kent, New Hampshire area. Whereas now you can do specific postcodes within a mile of a gym chain. And I think that's really exciting. So for all of the chat around telly being context-led, being program-led, being demographically led, we also believe there's a place at the table for the location. So again, and that sofa to store, you're just effectively using the same logic because it's a device, and tellies are fixed devices, right? People aren't walking around with tellies under their arm. So understanding that a telly will always be in the same place, which is a proxy for a home address, and then understanding that the mobile extends that consumer journey out of the home, being able to connect those two different customer journeys, the home and out of home, is a really powerful one. And we're having some really interesting conversations about CTV, but like everyone, it's in its infancy, it's very new, and there's still so many debates around access to broadcaster inventory, and so that's an area that we're really excited about certainly for 2025.
You talk about the gym in Maidstone there, and it's reminded me of a conversation you and I had probably when you first joined TapTap, and that's around the catchment area that you might want to reach for a new gym, for example. I think it was a new gym opening near you that was the sort of catalyst for the conversation. And it's true, isn't it, that quite often when people think about geofencing for a new gym, in this example, they think, okay, well, we'll just draw a 3-mile circle around the gym, and then that's what we'll target. But I used to work with a company called Location Sciences, and I know from the work that they were doing at the time that it's anything but a concentric circle of opportunity, because you might find that there's a major road that runs in the middle of that circle, which means that people are more likely to go 2 miles that way than 1 mile that way. Yeah. Or it might be that, in fact, in my own village, I live in a little village called Stoneleigh, and at the bottom of my road there's a railway track that basically cuts the village in two. So geofencing will tell you, oh, he's only 200 yards from a curry house, which I will never go to because it would require me going up the stairs, through the station, down the stairs, and to the other side, right? Yeah. So how can brands think about that? Because rather than just putting circles around areas of interest and really starting to understand where people are likely to come from. Because I think in the conversation that we had, if I remember rightly, you're saying that there was an area not far from you where there was no gym. Yeah. And it was actually probably like ripe. It wouldn't have been in a traditional geofence circle, but it would be right for prospecting, if you like, for that particular gym because there was nothing else around there.
So yeah, I think you've inadvertently asked two questions there. So the first one is around the physical barriers bit. So the technical term for this, for future pub quizzes, is an isochrone. And an isochrone is a line on a map that joins equal times and distance. So for example, you could have an isochrone around King's Cross Station where there's a part of London 3 miles away, but it's quicker to get to a part 20 miles into Hertfordshire because the fast train stops there. So an isochrone is it almost looks like a germ. It's like, very, very uneven, jagged edges. So, if you lived in Barnes, for example, where Barnes Bridge is closed in southwest London, there might be a gym that's 50 metres across the Thames, but that journey could take you 45 minutes. So, yeah, isochrones is important, which takes into account physical barriers, bridges, journeys, rivers, traffic, etc. The other bit, which was the bit that we talked about when I first started, was actually if you did a classic location campaign. So I used to live in Earlsfield in southwest London near Tooting. Earlsfield's quite a residential area and there's no gym there. So if you wanted to do a campaign for Huel or for a protein shake or something, you probably wouldn't do a campaign in Earlsfield because a location vendor would tell you there's no gym there. So the assumption is that nobody in Earlsfield goes to the gym. If you then, like we do, look at multiple different data sets, you look at demographics and it's really high, 24 to 44s, really key audience for gyms. You look at social listening data and you look at contextual data and loads of people are commenting and liking sports and fitness brands. They're downloading content around health, fitness, wellness, yoga, and it gets really high scores for that. So what it does is it discounts a bad data score, which is there's no gym there, but actually it's not about the gym. You're targeting people that are interested in health and fitness. They will go to a gym. There just isn't one in Earlsville for them to go to. So slightly nuanced point, because that's around the data layering and helping to understand using multiple different data sets what the best segmentation is versus the isochrone, which is not all catchment areas are a 2 pence piece on a map. They're not purely circle. They never are. They never have been. But that's kind of how the business probably has thought of them and probably still does.
Okay. So if we think about the physical world again, that we touched upon a few times now, if I remember back to it was a long time ago, but my Evening Standard days, I used to go to the gym at work in Kensington when I lived in Epsom. So I wouldn't likely have been targeted. I mean, actually, I was targeted because the Evening Standard were approached by the gym, but I wouldn't likely have been targeted in a classic location-based advertising campaign to go to the Kensington Holmes Place because I lived in Epsom. So do you do any work with brands and agencies to help them understand movement patterns and where people perhaps live and work or play or whatever it might be, to help them understand, to your Wayne Gretzky, where the puck's going, not where the puck's been kind of analogy?
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Literally that is the basis of area base, that people move. And so you need to understand where they are when they don't move, i.e. addresses and postcodes, where they travel to. And there's a mixture of different data sets like SDK data for mobility that you can find. But our platform is 100% around AI, machine learning, and understanding the times, the places and the moments at which people will be in certain places. And that's really key, not just for understanding where the people are going to be, but also understanding the creative message. So having that, dynamic content optimization or dynamic media insertion. So sticking an ad in only when something happens externally, be that a weather signal, which again is often very location based. It might be raining in Kensington, not in Epsom, and vice versa. So yeah, the central premise is you have to look at all of the different data sets. It's not about fixed location. It's also not about only when people are out of their homes. It's in, out, and around all of the different retailers.
Okay. So literally just last week, I was building an audience segment for a client on LinkedIn. So finding the marketers in the right brands that might be involved in media and advertising decisions, and then putting that together into an advertising target. And I noticed, probably with one eye on this podcast coming up, but I noticed that there was a lot of marketers with Omni-channel in their title. Have you seen this as a trend that's growing? Has it always been like that? I'd never noticed it before. And is that yet transferring into omni-channel briefs from an agency point of view?
Yeah, I guess every marketer should be omni-channel, right? Because it's
specifically called out though. It was like, I'm an omni-channel specialist or omni-channel marketing specialist.
Maybe the keyword makes you more attractive on LinkedIn for jobs or something. But I think the omni-channel bit is really interesting. I know that there are many companies that position themselves as omni-channel partners but can't deliver a certain bit. So they're an omni-channel DSP, but they're actually not connected into CTV, or they're not connected into out of home or audio. They're actually online mobile business, and they're trying to evolve. And so yeah, that's a bit. And then I guess there's a bigger picture around what parts of agencies and clients actually are truly omni-channel. And we have really interesting conversations with sort of the comms planners, with the strategic planners, and by definition, they're doing the holistic planning, right? So they're making sense of the brief from the client. They're trying to translate that into like real world customer journeys, into audience and behavioral patterns, so that they can make media decisions around that insight. And so, by definition, they have to be omni-channel in everything that they think about. I think the challenge comes when that translates through the funnel in an agency, particularly in bigger agencies, when it goes into specialist departments. You've got out-of-home specialists who often are external to the agency. Increasingly, they're now coming in-house. There's AV teams. There's still some individual radio teams and tele teams separately. Sometimes TV and video, online video is brought together. Now, sometimes increasingly see anything that moves and is visual is kind of AV generally. You've got separate teams for social. So I think we're just such a big industry. It's really hard to be truly omni. I don't know many agencies who are omni-channel. You go in and they have a very specific specialization. They are experts in social or search or out of home. So yeah, I think it depends. I think marketers comms planners, strategic planners, strategists tend to be omni because they have to be. And then the execution level, so long as that omni-channel story has been translated and positioned correctly internally, then it tends to fall through to the buyers to buy at an individual channel basis.
Okay, so a big campaign going through an agency, planned omni-channel at the comms planner level. When it gets down to buying, the TV's bought over there, the digital over there, the video over there, whatever. So you wouldn't consider that to be an omni-channel campaign, would you? It just happens to be in lots of channels.
I mean,
or is it?
I don't know. I guess it depends on if the definition of omni-channel is it all has to come through one platform, then arguably not. But sometimes it does. So increasingly there are many, and we could name a lot of them here quickly. There's lots of omni-channel DSPs that do have access into multiple channels and could plan and activate and measure those different channels. There's also a lot that say they are that aren't. I think if the brief has come media neutral and the comms and strategy work has come through with a leaning towards certain media channels, and then that's bought based on the omni-channel view at the top, then I think it probably is. I don't know. This might be a pub debate that could take weeks. Because I guess if the learning and the education, what you're effectively doing is that you buy this bit of TV, you don't need to know that that's part of omni-channel. I'm just asking you to do your job really well. But we know that it's super connected to the out of home and the mobile, because that's what our, from a TapTap point of view, our holistic planning that we've done that tells us all of the highest affinity areas of our audience that we're going to execute against. So long as you buy the plan that we've asked you to buy against, that is an omni-channel brief and an omni-channel execution. Just so happens that some of the execution is at a channel level. What do you think? Sorry,
it's an interesting one, and I suppose it doesn't really matter what we call it, as long as it works, right? But I don't know, because my next question was going to be,
hasn't media always been omni-channel? Like it's not.
Yeah.
It's not like TV plans first, and then any money left goes to something else, and then something. It's never been a sequential planning channel. Right? You've always had an allocation of this budget for here, and this much money on outdoor, and this much money on press.
Yeah.
So I feel like we've probably, again, we're always in danger of reinventing things that have already existed. Like a lot of retail media's existed before. A lot of it is new, for sure, and maybe that's true of the omni-channel. It just so happens that. It can be planned and measured and delivered all in one place. That does feel truly omni-channel, because the planning, the insight, the customer behaviors, the audience segmentation, and then the delivery has all happened on the same piece of technology.
Yeah. Can you give me an example about that? So can you give me an example of how a brand that was going to be buying their omni-channel campaign, whether we call it that or not, through one platform, what would be the advantages of doing that rather than the sort of classic, if you like, the comms planner decides which media, then the buying teams, the specialist buying teams buy their own little bit of it. What would be the benefit to putting all of that together and doing it through one platform?
Yeah, that almost answers itself. Like the benefit is that if your insight of the whole campaign is built on an understanding of where your customers are, for example, then executing that data feels like a really obvious thing to do. So another one of the conversations that we have with agencies is that this looks amazing. Like, we love what you're doing. We've got a contract with another DSP. Can we buy it through them? Like, can we use your insight, buy it through them? And our response to that is that the level of sophistication that we go to create these segments is very hard for anybody. If we just gave that to somebody else, they wouldn't be able to buy, plan, measure, report in the way that we would on our platform, because by definition our platform has literally been built from the bottoms up to be a area-based platform. So it's a bit like, we'd be throwing the ingredients to a different dish, to a Michelin star chef or to a cook who couldn't make what we're asking him to do because he's not got the right material. So, obviously having that, the marketing, the DMP bit, the segmentation and the audience building, and being able to deliver on the same platform feels like it's obvious. And I think agencies probably haven't got time to be flitting between platforms. And I think being a truly omni-channel platform partner to an agency where they can genuinely do everything that you can do, but also ingest their own data, their own proprietary data, their customer data into your platform to execute it in one place. That I don't have any conversations that aren't going in that direction.
Right. So a couple of months ago, I think it was now, you wrote something on LinkedIn about Inch's Cider, which I thought was a really good example of a lot of the things we've been talking about today. So it was an underground campaign. where they were saying you're basically hurtling underneath loads of pubs at 60 miles an hour or whatever, and here we are with this beautiful side of the audacity of us. And what I liked about that is it felt like it was contextually relevant to the environment that the consumer was in, because it was like, I'm talking to you on the tube. It's not just a generic poster. It was kind of pointing to the fact that when you get out, when you get back to ground level, that there'll be a pint of inches waiting for you, and there's a little bit of humour in there as well. So could you talk a little bit about what you liked about that? Obviously, you liked it enough to write a post about it. So yeah.
Well, there's an awful lot of really smart out-of-home ads, and there's an awful lot of fairly bog standard pack shot, bland strapline. Too many posters on roadside ads with too many words, like press ads stuck on a billboard that no one's got time to read. So yeah, it's quite refreshing. I think it was an underground, wasn't it? So I think they'd taken advantage of a bit of longer dwell time, had a bit longer copy. It was quite fun. It was kind of poking fun at the environment, but doing it in a really good contextual way. And I think again, we think about context a lot now as the thing that you are reading. And again, let's be honest, this is not new. Thought about sticking an ad for mortgages in the finance sections of the Times and Telegraph was happening when you were there many years ago. It's basic media planning. But I think being able to understand and change, so dynamically change copy based on those external segments like weather, traffic, you could have a live measure for traffic speed, and when it gets below 10 miles an hour, you could put 5 extra words into your billboard copy because traffic's driving slower. Therefore, the dwell time goes from 1 second to 2.5 seconds. Really cool, right? Really smart. Understanding. I'm having a conversation on one of the WhatsApp groups today about real-time flight information data in airports. So when if a flight lands from China into Heathrow, you could have Chinese copy on the ads, making people aware of Heathrow Express, of musicals and retailers to visit, and journeys into London, things to do while you're in London. And again, that's an automated feed, right? And that's more about dynamically changing the copy. But understanding the context in which somebody consumes the ad should not be something that we individually celebrate. It should be something that we do as a matter of course.
Yeah, that's very cool. Changing the copy length based on the dwell time. This made me think when you were talking there about the inches ad. If that was a digital billboard, what they could have done is they could have had footage of the pub that you've just gone past. You've just gone past the Marcus of Granby. Here's a nice pint of inches being sold. If you're getting off here, this would be a great time to, a great time to visit the Marcus. Yeah, interesting. So, are there any? So, if you were talking to a media planner, buyer instead of me, and I was asking you the question, how can I use location to tie together all of my different data sources and use an area-based marketing approach? What would be the best advice that you could give me?
Yeah. So you think about the planning funnel, and there's a lot of money still gets spent in broadcast media. So the challenge to any media agency and any client is to make sure that you get as little wastage as possible. Right? That's what media should exist to do, making sure that you find the right people, right place, right time. That's not a new concept. And what we try to do is when we look at 15, 20 different variables, each one of those gets a score at as I said, the geohash, but like I just call it a postcode type level. All of that information mathematically then gets scored on the strength versus all of the other 200,000 geohashes in the UK. So mathematically what you're doing is you're giving 200,000, you're ranking 200,000 places for every different data set. So you've got 10 different data sets. Each one of those has a ranking of 200,000. That gets compressed into one final score. So, the net effects, and this is something, the conversations we have a lot are back to the why location. Why is it important? Well, it's important because you are using multiple different bits of insight. You're scoring it. So lots of data we use in media planning and platforms is disparate, right? It doesn't make sense. It's apples and pears. So you could take a demographic data set and a contextual data set. They mean different things. But what most platforms do is just activate the right demo or activate the right context, and they don't marry them together because you can't. One might be census, one might be bidstream data. Right? They don't mean anything. So by giving each one of those categories of data a score about the same thing, which is location, you are effectively unifying all of your data sets. And it's what our chief product officer talks about. You're basically then comparing apples with apples. You're unifying and aggregating your data into one meaningful platform. So behind every one of our heat maps of the UK, there's different sets of 200,000 pieces of ranking. So you could have 1 million, 2 million different comparisons that have been going through to give you that data. What's the net effect of that? Less wastage, more targeted, the ability to be more culturally relevant, whether that's through kind of language or understanding traditions and events. It gives you the ability to be more effective, to drive more customers. There's just loads of really obvious benefit. The net effect is that ultimately you get less wastage and more targeted. But you also, while there are some customers that you may not be able to pick up data for, we are much more like our neighbours than we care to admit. And if you look at the typical, when you go to places, be that Soho House, Fitness First, the Odeon, it tends to pick up similar tribes because people do similar things. And I think that by advertising to people that are observed customers or potential customers, and targeting to people that you may not know, but they live in the same areas, effectively you're growing your effective reach.
Yeah, I just thought of, while you were talking there, I just thought of another example of something that could happen every day. You mentioned wastage. So if I was selling lawnmowers, for example, or garden furniture, and I decided I was going to put a 3-mile coin around all of my B&Q stores or Homebase or whatever it might be, what happens if there's a whole bunch of high-rise flats in that area that are in the geofence, so they are local to the Homebase, but they don't have a garden, so they don't have any grass, so they don't need any of the stuff that I'm advertising, right?
If you use someone else, you waste your ads. If you use our platform, we can analyze areas where there are single story, 2 stories, gardens, house price indexing, all of that stuff is you can do it, right? Yeah. And I think you're right. If you just do let's stick some ads within a 1 mile radius or a 5-minute drive time of B&Q, you are going to get a lot of wastage.
Yeah, interesting. Any final thoughts? We're nearly out of time. So any final thoughts you would like to leave us with before we say goodbye?
Yeah, look, I think we're really excited to be in the UK. We're expanding as a business. Yellow card to myself. We're expanding to Ireland, to Netherlands, to Germany. It's a really exciting time, I think, to be selling a contextual business. We know that there are alternatives being found for cookies. And as we said at the beginning, 50% of ads served online or mobile don't have a cookie attached to them already. So that's great. And really, you've only got 3 options, I guess. There's the ID solutions bit, which just feels like we're creating different ways of doing cookies. Like it's cookies with a fake nose and a beard on. You've then got contextual big picture, which kind of means at the moment just content, placing ads next to it. And then you've got, we believe that location is contextually really important. Serving ads when they're real-time ads in a gym or in a cinema clearly has a value because contextually people are there in the mindset. We talk about physical location as being a great observer of intent. We could go online now. We go, oh my God, have you seen the new Lamborghini? Right? We could waste 25 minutes here looking at Lamborghinis that I certainly could never afford. Maybe you could. And that's really easy, right? Because it costs us nothing. There's no effort. We can sit and go, oh my God, look at this. What color would you have? If you go to a store, bright yellow. If you go to a store, there is an intent. You're not going to physically walk or drive yourself to a place where you don't want to be. So we like to think about physical location being a server of intent, and there's not necessarily buyer intent, but just behavioural intent. So look, we're really enjoying being out there. We're sort of going around. We're seeing agencies. We're seeing clients. If what I've said is of interest to any of your listeners, we'd love to catch up and talk to them about it. But we think it's a really exciting space. Thanks for having us in. Thanks for helping us dispel some of the myths around area-based marketing.
My pleasure. It's just give me another thought, the Lamborghini. Firstly, yes, it would be lovely to have a Lamborghini. But secondly, could you potentially map audiences of people that have had a test drive based on the fact that they went to a Lamborghini dealership and then they went away from that Lamborghini dealership really quickly for about a mile and then went back again. So that was probably a test drive.
That was you, wasn't it? Yeah. You went to thrash a Lamborghini down there.
Yeah, I've got to go on a speed awareness course now. But that could be a segment, right? That could be an audience segment of people that have visited dealerships, potentially had a test drive but didn't buy, and therefore are ripe for
wider than that, helping retail brands and product, anyone who has a product that sells. You'd be surprised how little information they have about their customers. Generally, there are some clearly exceptions to that, but lots of people will know store sales. So we do work with quite a few brands actually that share store data with us, not super confidential store data, but they'll say, here's our top 100 stores in the UK. In order of our biggest seller to our lowest seller, please can you make sure that you allocate the resources, your media budgets accordingly? Because what they don't want is 1% of the media spend to go to all of them. They want more spent on the bigger stores because Bond Street is a flagship store versus a smaller, where did you say you live? Stoneleigh. Versus a Stoneleigh store, which is still lovely, I'm sure, but sells less stuff, so that it requires less support. So I know it's always hard speaking to clients about their data, the first party data, but we actually, when we explain what we do and how we do it, one of the first questions that clients here, not agents, but clients say to us is, can we drop our sales data into there? We're like, yeah, of course. Because our platform is literally built for them to do that. And I think some of the reticence for clients with doing that is they're dropping really valuable first party data into products or platforms that don't really action it in the way they should. So, when one thing that stores always know is how much stuff they sell in a store, whether that's a product or an actual retailer themselves. And it's all got a geo footprint. So, I think that's a really interesting conversation around. We talked about ID solutions, context, location, and then I guess the other one is clearly around first-party data and how much first-party data you can onboard into your own platform or your own sort of data stack.
Yeah, very exciting. We've run out of time, so I'm going to have to stop asking you questions, but I've got loads more, so maybe you'll have to come back again.
Love that.
Nigel, thank you so much for your time and thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Mike.